pink, obviously. Today, after a request from one of my friends here, we were talking about the expression that when we were growing up was used sometimes by our parents or our grandparents, and the phrase was, "Sweet Fanny Adams." Many people don't know the origin of this, and it was used quite widely and came to represent something like, it meant, Sweet Fanny Adams meant nothing, very little. So this phrase has gone into sort of mists of time, and many don't realise that there was a Fanny Adams. And in fact, Fanny Adams' story was anything but sweet. Many know that Alton in Hampshire, England, is the home of Jane Austen, a very famous writer, most famously known these days for Pride and Prejudice, Emma, and such novels. I myself know Alton very well, as I think do many. It's a quiet-ish town now, but at the time of when Fanny Adams was alive, it was a rural village, a quiet, peaceful place in Hampshire. And on Saturday, August the 24th, 1867, this little rural village, as it was then, became the talk of the nation when the abduction of a girl in this picture here, this sweet, innocent little girl called Fanny Adams, was found murdered and mutilated. It created horror and revulsion throughout the whole of the land. Nobody at the time could recall any murders in Alton, Hampshire before this, let alone one of such savagery. And this is how it unfolded on that sad, tragic day. On that day, 3 little girls went out to play together, not knowing that their innocent lives would change forever. And indeed, one of those little girls would not return home alive. Fanny was 8 years old. Her sister Lizzie was 7, and her friend Minnie, 8. They walked off happily together from Fanny's home in Tannhouse Lane towards Flood Meadow. On their travels through the countryside, and you can imagine the scene, these 3 little girls running about, skipping, screaming, shouting, singing, picking flowers maybe, came across 29-year-old Frederick Baker, who was a solicitor's clerk. Frederick Baker was smartly dressed in a black frock, coat, waistcoat, and light-coloured trousers. From the outside, Baker looked respectable, as befitting his position, but had been drinking fairly heavily. And as we've come to learn over the centuries, and even now up to date, what you wear does not reflect what you are on the inside. As I say, he'd been drinking fairly heavily. And Baker offered little Minnie Warner 3 halfpence if she would take herself and Fanny's sister, Lizzie, away somewhere else to play. Fanny was offered a halfpenny to go with Baker to the Hollow, which led to the village of Sheldon. But when he gave her the money, she refused to go with him. Sensible little girl. Obviously, this didn't please Baker, and annoyed, he picked her up and he carried her off into a hop field and out of sight. This was about 1:30 in the afternoon, an August summer's afternoon. The two girls, Minnie and Lizzie, played together until about 5 p.m. and then they decided to make their way home. And Mrs. Gardner, a neighbour of the Adams, spotted the girls and said, "Where's Fanny?" They told her that Baker had given them the money and what had happened, and clearly alarm bells began to ring in her head sensibly. We call them red flags now, don't we? Or gut feelings or whatever. She, Mrs. Gardner, and Minnie rushed back up the lane in search of them both. As they were searching along the lane, who should be coming towards them, returning alone to the village, was Frederick Baker. Mrs. Gardner demanded to know where Fanny was and what he'd done with her, and his reply was simply, "Nothing." He denied the allegations against him. He denied giving Minnie 3 halfpence if she and Lizzie would go off and leave Fanny with him, but said the money he gave Minnie was for sweets. Baker was threatened with the police, but he told Mrs. Gardner to do what she liked and walked away. Eventually, at about 7 p.m. in the evening, a search party was formed and they made their way to the hop garden, and what they found there was the most hideous, ghastly sight one could imagine. In the gateway they found a pool of blood, and beneath a hedge, the decapitated head of poor innocent little Fanny, stuck on 2 hop poles. One can only imagine the horror that they felt when they saw this sweet little innocent girl. And around the field was the rest of her body, cut into pieces. Fanny's father was told of the find, and in a furious blind rage he made his way back home to get a shotgun, but fortunately for him and Baker, he was disarmed. Eventually, Frederick Baker was found and arrested at his office, but he kept on insisting on his innocence. But spots of blood were seen on his clothing. Obviously there's no DNA, but the fact that he had blood on his clothing on that same day kind of screamed at everyone, I think, really. The people were outraged at this hideous crime and would have probably hung him had not the police superintendent not smuggled him out of the back door of the police station. After Baker was charged with the murder, he was held in custody for a week and then transferred by cab to Winchester, which is a place I know well as well and spent a lot of time in as a child. A glorious little town with an amazing cathedral, but I digress. Anyway, he was taken to Winchester in a cab, where an angry crowd was waiting for him, because news travelled fast in those days, even if they didn't have the phones. The police managed to get away from the crowd who were trying to grab at him. An inquest was held in the Duke's Head Inn on the Tuesday evening after the murder, and the evidence was heard, and the sad remains of Fanny were viewed. Baker was asked if he had anything to say, and all he could say was, "I'm innocent." He was remanded for trial, and that began on Thursday the 29th of August in Alton Town Hall, still there now. And one of the most shocking pieces of evidence was an entry for the 24th of August in his diary, which was found in his office. And it said chillingly, quotes, "Killed a young girl. It was fine and hot." It took only 15 minutes for the verdict of the jury to find him guilty, and the judge advised them that maybe Baker was not responsible for his actions due to him being abused by his father when he was a child. What we now have to call SA on social media platforms. And that's not me being disingenuous, it's just the way it is now. The plea was rejected by the jury, and the judge had no choice but to hand out the death sentence. And on the 24th of December 1867, Frederick Baker had the dubious honour of being the last person to be hanged in public at Winchester. To add insult to injury over a murder case so shocking in 1869, tins of mutton were introduced into the Royal Navy food rations, and when soldiers opened the tins, they declared the contents must be the butchered remains of, quote, "sweet Fanny Adams," quote. And therefore the tins became known as Fanny's. One of the interesting facts is that they never found the weapon that was used to murder this sweet little girl. Fanny is buried in Alton Cemetery. And as you'll see, I'll put some pictures on here of various things around this time. There was a memorial service read by the Reverend W. Wilkins, curate of Thedden. Many people were present, and a collection was made to pay for a gravestone. The parish register entry for Fanny's burial has a footnote reading, quotes, "cruelly murdered by Frederick Baker." Fanny's tombstone still stands in Alton Cemetery and reads, quotes, "Sacred to the memory of Fanny Adams, aged 88 years and 4 months. Aged 8 years and 4 months. Who was cruelly murdered on Saturday, August the 24th, 1867. Quotes, "Fear not them which kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both body and soul in hell." Quotes. The stone was erected by voluntary subscription. As I say, the expression, as I said at the beginning and halfway through, that some of us have grown up with, our parents or grandparents saying, quote, "Sweet Fanny Adams," and was coined by the sailors in the Royal Navy in 1869. It's a macabre humour. Often sailors do have that because of the nature of how they would have lived, or they often, for instance, would, if somebody passed away out at sea, would be put in a barrel of alcohol because it would preserve the body if they weren't able to bury them at sea. Somebody like Nelson, for instance, would have been put in as much alcohol as he could because he was a hero and could have a proper burial when he got home to land, which he did. But the macabre humour, that likened the contents of their tin meat to Fanny's remains is, well, bizarre to say the least, to us now perhaps, or perhaps not, because many of us do have that sort of humour. But it grew into this euphemism for sweet nothing. So basically, mutton was considered nothing. But it certainly wasn't sweet. And I'm still trying to work out really why. But there we are. So, reading about Fanny Adams, as I've done today, because of the brief discussion I had with my friend on here, on YouTube, it just shows you, sadly, that things, or humanity, doesn't change that much. It's about opportunity, often, or lifestyle, or whatever it is. We're still trying to work out the human psychology of these child killers. And we will continue to do so. We do have more resources than we used to have. We have DNA, we have forensic analysis, we have all sorts of things, as we know from one particular case that's current on YouTube at the moment, sadly. But they may have destroyed this girl's body, Fanny Adams, that is. But the one thing they couldn't destroy was her innocence. And she will be with the angels always. But I don't think Frederick Baker will be. And I apologise if this may slightly be upsetting or triggering, as we say these days, for people. And if so, I understand why you may not have wanted to listen all the way through. But it's an interesting tale, a sad, tragic tale. And we must learn about these tales going back, or people's predilections, whatever, even if we're not always sure of their guilt, as insights, possibly, to why they may behave the way they do. And I'll leave it there. I hope you found this of interest. Take care. Carrie Pink.